Hello everyone, my name is Kuntal Shah. I'm here to talk about the basics of concert snare drum with you. So we'll go ahead and get started with just the setup and making sure that we're set up for success with how the drum is set up and oriented and whatnot. So the first thing is we want to make sure that the drum height is correct. So we want to make sure that it's approximately 3 inches below the lower abdomen of the player. We don't want that too high or too low. We want it to be in a comfortable position. The next thing is we want to make sure that our elbows and wrists are in the right position that they need to be relaxed. So when we play, we want to make sure that our elbow is relaxed, and we want to make sure that our wrist has some space between the rim and where the fingers are here. So we would say probably about 3 inches or so above the rim is where that wrist should be sitting. And then, of course, we want to have a downward angle towards the drum here. So the orientation of the drum, we want to make sure that the snares are oriented so that they're going north-south, so vertical in front of the player. That allows the player to always be playing on top of those snares. And it also allows for the snare release, the lever right here, to be right in front of the player for easy access for any switches they need to make. And then the last thing I'll talk about with the setup is just the performer itself and their stance and posture. We want to make sure that we're in a relaxed posture, shoulders are nice and relaxed here, feet are about shoulder width apart, and again, just setting up our whole bodies for success in terms of the setup. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the grip itself. So first things first, we want to make sure that we're gripping our fulcrum at approximately 1/3 of the way up the stick. And then the next thing is that we'll talk about is the T grip. So we want to make sure we make a T with our thumb and first finger here, and that stick falls between it. That will be our main point of any pressure and control on the stick right here. The other fingers should wrap around the stick naturally. They shouldn't be squeezing the stick, they shouldn't be open, and they shouldn't have any fingers off the stick, but we want to have just even pressure across the stick there. Then when we get to playing on the drum, we want to ensure that we maintain that T grip, not let those thumbs come up or anything like that. We want to also make sure that the thumbs are facing to the side and inward. And we want to ensure that we don't have too wide of an angle here. We want to have a nice relaxed angle, slightly less than 90 degrees or so. The next thing is we want to make sure we're not playing dead center in the drum. We're not playing too close to the rim, but about 3 inches north of center on the head. Now we're going to talk about creating sound and stroke types on the drum. So the first thing to think about is that there's 2 parts of the equation of creating a good sound on the drum. Obviously, along with staying relaxed, we want to think about using velocity, which is the speed at which we're striking the drum, as well as rebound, which is allowing that stick to move in its natural path off of the drum. So as we go into these stroke types, I'll be mentioning these terms. So the first stroke type we're going to talk about is the full stroke or the piston stroke. And in this stroke, the most important thing is that the bead starts and ends in the exact same spot. So what I'm going to do with this stroke is I'm going to initiate from my wrist. I'm going to throw the stick with velocity towards the head and allow that stick to rebound back up to where it started. What's important here is that we're not initiating from our elbow or our forearms, but we're initiating from our wrist. So rather than from here, we're initiating from here. We don't want to incorporate too much arm in this part of the stroke. It's less efficient, and it's not going to create the same sound that we're going for here. So as we relate the piston stroke or the full stroke back to those first 2 terms, velocity and rebound, we want to remember when we're thinking about velocity that we're thinking about knocking motion. So as we're playing on the drum, it's a knocking motion. And we're thinking about rebound being similar to dribbling a basketball and letting that ball bounce back to you. So the next stroke type we're going to talk about is the downstroke. This stroke type prepares us from a louder dynamic to the transition into a smaller dynamic. So the initiation part of this stroke type is the exact same as the full stroke. It starts from the wrist with that same knocking motion. But what's different is that it's going to stop down here, so we're not allowing the stick to rebound back up to where we started. How I do that is controlling the amount of space in my hand itself. So an example of a downstroke starts at the top and will end at whatever dynamic level that we're going down to. And then the upstroke is the opposite of the downstroke. It's preparing us to go from a softer dynamic to a louder dynamic. It again will start with the initiation from the wrist, but we're going to help the stick move to the height that we need it to go to. So for example, so it's going to require some assistance from that wrist to pull that stick up into whatever dynamic level we're going to from there, into playing whatever's coming from there, whether it's a forte full stroke or a forte downstroke to follow. The next topic we're going to discuss is rolls. So there's two types of rolls that we're going to talk about. One of them is the multiple bounce roll or the buzz roll, and the other is the double stroke roll. So the first thing we'll talk about with the buzz roll, the multiple stroke roll, is we want the stick and the bead to fizzle out on the head itself. The idea is that we get as long of a sound as possible before the next hand has to play. Hence the multiple bounce. We're letting that stick continue to bounce. So in this motion, we're using this fulcrum and some pressure in this fulcrum to engage the stick to move as we push it against the head. And we're allowing for a little bit of space in that grip for that stick to move. If we squeeze the stick too much on those buzz rolls, they'll get choked off and it won't fizzle out the way we want it to. So we want to make sure there's some space in that grip for it to bounce. And then the other roll type we're going to discuss is the double stroke roll. So this, as it is titled, is 2 strokes per hand. So this is an open roll. It's going to sound like a true rhythm. And what we're doing here again is engaging our fulcrum, our T grip here, but also engaging our grip a little bit more than we are, the back fingers here, a little bit more than we are in the buzz roll. The double stroke roll, like I said, has a clear articulate rhythm in that sound. And as we get faster and faster, we want to be able to engage those fingers a little bit more. So slower double stroke rolls will maybe need to have a little bit more control from the back of the grip. And then as we're speeding up, we can use that fulcrum pressure to help us with controlling that. Thank you for watching this video on the basics of concert snare drum. Again, my name is Kuntal Shah. Happy practicing.